Church. Glad to have you with us today. My name is Ron Otto, and I'm the senior minister here. And if you're new to us and you're looking for a church, man, we're hoping to be that church for you. You're always welcome here. Just real quick to start off with, next Sunday I begin a new series. It's a short series on end times. It's titled The End, What Happens Next. There's a lot of dialogue right now going on about end times. Most people feel like this whole thing, this whole earth and planet and life is marching towards something. Just we don't always know what. Jesus had a lot to say about end times. In fact, he gave us some signposts along the way, things to look for as we're getting close to end times. There's a lot of end time preachers out there. I'm not looking to step over any edge. I'm not going to give you any dates as to when it's going to happen, but this all starts next Sunday. When I planned this, by the way, and had the elders approve that series to follow Easter, I was totally unaware of the eclipse that's coming up. Have you heard this thing yet? All right, so next Sunday is April 7th, and Monday in the middle of the day, April 8th, there's this eclipse. It's going over our state, pretty heavy. A lot of people are freaking out that this is one of the end time signs, because Jesus did talk about signs that would be seen in the moon and the sun. He clearly says that. I'll show you all of that. And so a lot of people are thinking, wow, could this be it? Could this be the day he's coming back? What I also read this week, though, was the Sunday after Easter is called Skip Sunday. That more people who make a point to be in church on Easter Sunday make an equal point to be missing the next Sunday. Now, just follow me for a moment. If the Monday after next Sunday Jesus comes back, you skip the Sunday before. Does that sound like a good idea? It's just a thought. It's just a thought. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's just a thought. It means a lot to me that you're here today. This is heavy for any preacher. Easter Sunday, we call this the Super Bowl of Sundays for preacher. Let me tell you about my childhood real quick. As a kid, I grew up that Christmas meant gifts. Christmas meant gifts, but I was also reminded, but Santa's watching. Santa knows who's naughty and nice. He's watching. If you want to have a good Christmas, you might want to clean up your act a little bit, Ronnie. And so that's kind of how I was raised. My birthday also meant gifts, but Dad was watching. And so leading up to my birthday, I was always extra good, so that Easter was a no-stress holiday. At no point in my life did anyone say, the Easter Bunny's watching. No, it was no stress. It's just easy. Man, you didn't have to be good. You just got up on Easter morning, and there was a gift. There was this basket, colored eggs, candy bunnies, chocolate heaven. It was just there for you, and I didn't have to do anything to get it. It was just incredible. Some of you think that I'm going to tie this into the free gift of salvation. I'm not. I'm telling you that I've taken a no-stress holiday and have made it one of the most stressful days of my year. And you're the reason why. Do you know that? I can't tell you how many times this week I encountered people out in the stores and in the streets and stuff where people said to me, hey, I've got friends coming, or I got family members coming, or I got a coworker coming. And then they leaned into me and they said, and you better be good. You mean more than normal? Oh, come on, give me that one at least. I am thrilled that you picked us today. I believe, and Christians believe, that this day changes everything for us. Easter changes everything. They say an empty tomb is no big deal. After all, you can go to Egypt and see several empty tombs. Well, yeah, if somebody broke into the tomb and stole the body, then you're right, an empty tomb is no big deal. However, if I capitalize, that body in that tomb came back to life and walked out on its own, then it changes everything. That empty tomb changes everything. And Christians believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In Acts chapter 1, it says, after his suffering, Jesus presented himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God. A lot of people who are new to Christianity don't even realize that Jesus stuck around that long. They thought he appeared to the disciples and then kind of went away. It was 500 witnesses who saw Jesus alive. He was alive and around for 40 days, talking with them, teaching them, getting them ready. The church didn't create the story of Jesus. It was the story of Jesus that launched the church. The resurrection of Jesus is what created Christianity. It's interesting to me that so many world religions out there are offered up as a viable source, and they're not a viable source. I'm not here to beat up on all these other religions. I just want you to understand the difference. All the founders of all the world religions are still in the grave. They died and they stayed dead. Only one founder of a religion came back from the dead to verify that he was telling us the truth. Now, all these other world religions, by the way, isn't it interesting that they speak so highly of Christianity, of Jesus? Islam, it started well after the time Jesus was here on earth, and yet they consider him a great prophet. And in the Islam religion, they will tell you that Jesus is a way to God. But what about all the religions that are older than Christianity? All those Eastern religions also, in their time, have either merged Jesus into their story, they either mention Jesus, or they have modified their views to include him in their teaching. Hinduism, Buddhism, Krishna, all these Eastern religions, they claim a Christ consciousness, that you can have a Christ consciousness, or they declare him as a way. So all these world religions are willing to give you that Jesus is a way to God. Now, here's the big switch. It's what Jesus said in John chapter 14. I am the way. He didn't say a way. He said the way, the truth, the life. And then he added this, no one. And this is where the critics are not going to be happy with this because it's exclusive. Jesus says, no one comes to the Father except through me. It's exclusive. Is it? If there's many ways to God, then there's many ways that don't lead to God. How do you know if you're on the right road or not? God made it so simple. He said, there's one door. There's just one shepherd. There's just one gate. There's just one way in. You don't have to fret over whether or not you're on the right road with all these many roads. There's just one way to get there, and it's through Jesus Christ. And that's what we Christians believe in. And when Jesus came back from the dead, he verified that that was the truth. So here's some pieces of Easter that I just love so much. The resurrection of Jesus really reverses everything that happened in the Garden of Eden. Number one, everything that took place in the Garden of Eden that caused the downfall and the collapse of mankind, Jesus comes along and reverses all of it. And I love when the Bible does this. I love when the Bible gives you contrast. In the beginning of the Bible, the book of Genesis chapter 2 and chapter 3, this is when this whole thing gets started. Adam and Eve are given a paradise, a garden paradise. And God is with them, by the way. God walks with them and talks with them in that garden. But then they eat this forbidden fruit. They have a conversation with a serpent who ends up being the devil. He talks him into disobedience. It's not that the fruit was a big deal. Don't get caught up on the fruit. It's that they disobeyed God. That's what sin is. And then when that happened, God drove them out of paradise. He brings a curse on them of death. Now you're going to die. They wouldn't have died before, but now they have a curse of death. And now they cause this curse of sin. From the Garden of Eden forward now, we're all on this road of mankind, this fall that took place. What could ever reverse all of that? You get all the way to the end of the Bible. By the way, that's at the beginning of the Bible. Way at the end of the Bible is the book of Revelation. And in 21:22, everything gets reversed. Because of Jesus, first of all, the sin curse is taken away from us. And then we receive a resurrection from the dead. When you die, you get resurrected, which then, hey, today you will be with me in paradise, he told the thief, and we're welcomed into paradise. And then there's still a tree of life there that you and I are encouraged to eat from. And God will dwell with us for all eternity. We receive this new paradise of this new heaven and earth. Isn't that incredible that God did that at the beginning of the Bible? It's almost like bookends. And at the end of the Bible, the fall and the lost, losing paradise and the restoration of paradise. And what stands between those two moments? One key figure, Jesus Christ. He stands in the middle. What Jesus reverses in the story of Adam, by the way, he reverses in you and I. Jesus has always been one who restored life. He loved to restore life. He resurrected people who were dead while he walked this earth, people who were wounded and injured and lame and hurt and blind. He restored all of that. Jesus is this great restorer. And you and I love stories of restoration. So my wife's father passed away a few years ago. He was a very respected man. There's days she misses him and just a good godly man. She came home recently because they're cleaning out the old homestead with some of her dad's old toys. There was inside this box some old toy dump trucks that date back to the 1930s. That's when he was born. These were his early toys, and they were in bad shape. The one had no wheels on it, and the other one, the bed of the truck wouldn't stay down, and I had to fabricate parts for that. Anyway, I decided, you know what, for our wife's anniversary, I'm going to surprise her. She didn't know what she was going to do with those, and I snuck those out of the box. And first thing I did is I went and I had them sandblasted, and then I had them primed. I did prime painting on them, got them all ready. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to lay down some paint on it and just using a spray can, but I did some research, and they said what really helps enamel to really set up well is if you bake it for a while. And I only have access to one oven. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, my wife is hearing this story for the first time, all right? So after I spray painted them that day, she was at work, I put them in our oven, and I set it at 170 for 2 hours, and I baked the enamel in. What I wasn't expecting was the fumes. I filled that house with these fumes. That was horrible. When I pulled those out, 1 hour before my wife comes home from work, and I'm like, I am dead meat. And so I'm opening up windows and stuff. I'm burning Christmas candles. I'm doing whatever I can do to get rid of the scent. 1 hour later, she comes walking in the door, and she's like, wow, the windows are open. It's kind of cool. What are you doing? And I'm like, oh, it just felt good to me. And then she's like, you're burning candles? She saw all the romance in it, and oh, yeah, that's my plan, honey. Anyway. So I'm telling you, I promise you, she hears it for the first time. So what were just me as just what are my restoration abilities? They looked like this when I was done. I know. I expected a little tear from her eye when she got it and everything. She was like, oh, that's nice. I was like, ah. Everything Jesus does is just to restore us from it doesn't matter if you're hurt, if you're wounded. It doesn't matter if you've got regrets. It doesn't matter if you've shipwrecked your life. It doesn't matter how bad it is. You can walk 10,000 steps away from God, and he's always just one step back in Jesus Christ. It's just this easy moment to just move back. And God right now is reaching out to some of you. What? You think it's just a coincidence you're here today? Is it just because you're a good gal or a good guy and you're like, I got this invitation? Do you not understand that God uses strategically placed Christians in someone's life to help get their attention? He does it all the time. A strategically placed Christian in the workforce or in a neighborhood or in a group of friends or in a family. There's just someone who's strategically placed there by God because he wants to pull you close that bad. And the invitation today to come to church, that was no accident. No, he's looking for you. So not only does Jesus reverse the story of Adam, and then he reverses my story, the resurrection of Jesus then changes not only the way I live, but it changes the way I die. Christians, it freaks people out. If you're not a Christian, the world's funerals, secular funerals are painful, just painful. The sense of loss is just so great. But a Christian funeral is so different. It's just so different. Why? Because we don't fear death. We believe when Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you, that he's going to keep his word. The resurrection proved that he's going to keep that word. So that's why we die differently, all right? And I'm not trying to freak anyone out here today, but you're going to die. I know a preacher who was preaching on death one Sunday, and he made that announcement. He said, listen, I love you, but everyone in this congregation is going to die. And a gentleman sitting down front started laughing. He's puzzled, and he goes, maybe he didn't hear me correctly. So he said a little sternly, he goes, everyone in this congregation will one day die. And the man started laughing out loud, and that perturbed the minister, and he goes, what are you laughing at? And the guy said, I'm not a member of this congregation. Sure, exercise may buy a few more heartbeats, and medicine may grant a few more breaths, but in the end, there's always an end. It was just a year ago that really was a wild story. An elderly man in a convalescent home. He went to breakfast one morning, Christian man. He went to breakfast one morning, and as they wheeled him up to the table with all his friends there and stuff, he looked down at his plate, and here was just a plate full of pills. Something he had to do every day. And he said, you know what, I'm done. He said, I'm done. And they go, no, you got to take your medicine. He goes, nope, I'm not doing it anymore. He said, I've lived a good, long life. The Lord is preparing a place for me. I don't like this place so much. I'm going to go home. And they called his family in, and, Dad, you got to take your, no, I'm all done. He said, which one is for pain? That's the only one I want. And that's like, and he pushed a plate of pills away, and he said, I want eggs and bacon and biscuits and gravy. Bring it now. And he lived for about 2 more months. The man was so convinced of the afterlife, he just reached that point with, why am I hanging on here? That doesn't mean you have a death wish. It doesn't mean you take matters in your own hand. That's not what I'm encouraging you. I'm just telling you, sometimes when you are so convinced there's a resurrection after life, you don't claw and hang on to this life like the world does. You're free to enjoy life. You're free to have more adventure. You take more risk, It's okay. God's got me at the end of all this. Yeah, that's what this is all about. You sang today a very powerful line. You sang that Jesus borrowed a tomb. That song really had deep impact in me a few weeks ago. It got my brain thinking, Jesus borrowed a tomb. Really, he borrowed everything. Do you understand that? That the Prince of Heaven, the creator of the universe, God used Jesus to create everything. He owns everything. But when he came down in human form, he had nothing. He came down so low in this world that he had to borrow everything. He had to borrow a womb. The one who created Mary, his mother, had to borrow her womb, and then he had to borrow a stable. And then he borrowed a house to teach from, and then he had to borrow a boat to travel in, and then he borrowed a hillside as his pulpit to preach, and then he borrowed a boy's lunch, and he fed thousands with that. And then he borrowed a donkey to ride into Jerusalem as the king. But as the king, he had to borrow a donkey. And then he borrowed an upper room where he had Passover. But when he became human, he had to borrow human limitations. He had to borrow blood and flesh. He eventually borrowed our sin and our curse and took it upon himself, and he went to a cross that he just borrowed. But with all of that, most important and most impressive is that he borrowed a tomb for just 3 days. And what Jesus did, you and I will do. You just borrow a tomb, by the way. I should go out to the cemetery and start a whole new business, graves for rent. Because you're not there long. It's just borrowed. What this whole thing is about for Christians, for your Christian friends, is that when this world comes to an end, we want to really stick the landing the very best we can. And we've put our hope in the one who shows us that there's life after death. The dude who beat death, that's the dude I'm going to follow. Bonnie and I were flying into a vacation spot, an island, beautiful, and the sea, the airport was right next to the sea and these steep mountains. And so this little island paradise, we're coming in, and they said, there's usually a lot of turbulence at this airport. Said, we want you to be seat belted in. So we all tightened our seat belts. I had no idea. In fact, I'm convinced it was the worst they've ever had, because as we were coming in, it wasn't just banks left and right and pitching and down, and we were dropping at times. I mean, a couple feet, it was lifting us right out of the chair. You know, Bonnie's claw marks are still in my hand. But what surprised me was the flight attendants. Even they looked at each other. They got big eyebrows. They stopped serving it. They went right to their seats and buckled themselves in those little jump seats. And you should have seen their surprise as they were flying up and down. And then when we finally came down to we had the hardest landing I've ever had in my life. I mean, that plane, boom, it hit the ground hard, and all of a sudden there's screeching brakes, and and we're just hanging on. And finally, when we're taxiing in, everyone finally went, oh my gosh. And you should have seen the whole plane. The whole plane was just, man, they were at a loss. We're walking off, and just by chance, I ended up right up at the cockpit when the cockpit doors opened up. The cockpit doors opened, and there were the two pilots. And I mean, literally, we came eye to eye. And I looked at him and I said, gentlemen, did we land or were we shot down? See, they didn't see the humor you see in that for some reason. We're followers of Jesus Christ. We don't make any apologies about it. Because at the end of this world, when it happens, we want to be able to stick the landing and be connected to the one who beat death. It's that simple. Anything else is too big of a risk. Anything else, you're just taking a big chance. You too need Jesus Christ. Period.